Stephen, appreciate you jumping on today from nice and toasty Vegas Summer League. I'm sure a lot of listeners and people are out there. Too bad they'll probably hear this a little bit late, but thanks for hopping on and excited to dive into this. This is a space I'm definitely interested in, and a lot of people are now more so than ever, it seems.
Yeah, very excited to be here, and yeah, it's warm here, but the aircon is working in the hotel, so we're safe from the Vegas heat right now.
You gamble at all, or are you just strictly business out there?
No, I'm here for business, so get my meetings done, get back to my hotel, get my emails done, and get myself home.
Right. I mean, starting a business enough, I always tell people I don't gamble or bet either. It's like when you're doing your own thing, it's like that feels like a gamble and risk anyway. You don't need to go ring any slots or anything. So
I
I
call
guess
my bets
before we
myself.
get too into the details, give us a rundown a little bit of who you are, what Kitman is, and we can keep it short and sweet, just the high level, and we'll dive deeper into it.
Yeah, so I'm Irish originally, been over here in the US for 10 years now, growing this business out. I have a background in sports medicine and then a qualification in strength and conditioning as well. Spent close to 10 years working in professional sports and played quite a unique role sitting between the rugby coaching side of the team that I worked in, the sports medicine team, and the strength and conditioning team, and trying to be the gel between those departments. And I think there's often friction in high performance environments because everybody is trying to get different things from the athletes. Everybody cares passionately about the organization pushing forward, and everybody's trying to represent their own department. And I learned very quickly that at that point in time there was a significant lack of both data and understanding of like an objective approach of how do we manage our athletes, what are we doing, how do we coach them, how do we select them, what types of drills do we use, what are the best recovery methods, etc. We just didn't know enough. The infrastructure wasn't sophisticated enough or instrumented enough for us to be able to really guide our decision making using information and to learn as an organization. And I set about on changing that. That's why I started this company. Essentially, was to build a way for us to bring all of the masses of data that have been collected within this industry together, and then to provide us with a mechanism of answering the most important questions for each of us within our organizations to help us push forward and learn and improve.
And how have you seen wearables and the introduction of a lot of these different technologies evolve, not only in the time you've been building, but also evolve the business? Because I'm sure you think of things differently now than you did when you started it, nearly a decade ago or over a decade ago to now.
Yeah, I think I think people are taking a much more mature and pragmatic approach to the use of data, the use of analytics, the use of technology, whether it's wearables or anything else. I think in the very beginning, the earliest phases of this, if I think back to going to places like MIT Sloan 10 years ago, I think, wearable sensors were just exploding on the scene and everybody was like, this is going to change the game. We're going to be able to do all of these things. We're going to be able to predict injuries tomorrow. And I think, everybody jumped in off the deep end and then realized, wow, they just have a huge amount of data, and without the context and understanding, or without the ability to start linking that information to, to other data sources or other outcome measurements, it's really hard for that data to be meaningful. So I think what we've seen change is that people have taken a much more mature approach, and they understand there is no silver bullet to solving the problems that we're talking about. Now, what we need to do is, like, the vast majority of technology and analytic problems within this industry are change management problems. It's about figuring out for each organization, what are they trying to achieve? What types of, what does that mean in terms of, well, what challenges are we facing? What types of questions do we need to answer? What types of data would we need to answer those questions? And kind of starting with the end in mind, rather than jumping in and just saying, hey, we need a wearable and that's going to solve all of our problems. And I think that's a really good thing, right? I think this industry has been like this, I think, over the last number of years, as people have learned what doesn't work. I think that's probably one of the greatest breakthroughs we've had in sports technology, is we realize what doesn't work at this point.
Do you use a lot of the technology yourself, like in terms of wearables, or what are the ones that fascinate you personally?
I think it's different. We're going through different phases of kind of evolution and development of technology. I think the area that I think can probably shed the most light moving forward is like biomechanical data. So we're starting to see products that are emerging with high-powered cameras, that instead of just having a wearable sensor that gives us an XYZ of where an athlete is on the field and how they're moving, if we can track biomechanical data, we can see where they are in the field, we can see how fast they're moving, but we can see what's happening at their knee, we can see what's happening at their ankle, we can see what's happening at their hip. We can, if we can really start to get that detailed about what's happening with the human body, and then be able to link that information to performance data. So we know, okay, well, this is what, when somebody kicks a ball like this is what it looks like. When somebody kicks a ball like this is what it looks like. When somebody gets, if we can also link that to injury data, so we can see, oh, these are the changes that we see biomechanically before a person picks up an overuse injury. Like, they're the types of outcomes that really excite me. And the first generation, I would say, wearable solutions or optical tracking solutions just didn't have that depth or that capability. And to me, I think that presents huge excitement, because it gets us one step closer to really being able to solve some of these problems.
Yeah. And how have you seen, obviously, artificial intelligence, big talk these days, play into this? Has it been around? Has it really, I think in sports, it's been here for quite some time, but have you seen a big jump in it, or is it still really the same for you internally, not the hype from the outside media?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about AI in general in every industry. I think for us, the way we think about it is that it's just one branch of analytics, right? Data science and analytics. AI is one tool within like a very large toolbox. And I think there are certainly use cases and opportunities that AI can influence. And when we think about things like, again, let's go back to optical tracking, but we say like optical tracking today, it's quite manual in a lot of sports, in that the film is taken from the game. Each of the different segments, or like the performance outputs or things that we're seeing on the field, game events, are tagged manually into that, to then layer that kind of intelligence into the video, so we can see, okay, let's see all of the crosses, let's see all of the shots, let's see all of the tackles, etc. I think there's a huge role for AI to learn about our games and to be able to like produce automated tagging. And that means, I think where that really has an impact is that today the most professional leagues in the world have very sophisticated tracking systems, but if we can start to push down those type of systems to youth sports and to developmental sports, now we can start to get a level of sophistication on what performance look like at a very young age, and we can start to follow the pathway of athletes all the way through from earlier stages to later stages. That will give us a way better picture of what talent development looks like, and a better understanding of how to optimize that, how to improve that, and essentially how to give people the keys to their own castle, right, and help them to help them to improve their own performance development capabilities.
It's interesting. From a like technology standpoint, have you seen any new gadgets or features? You're talking about 10 years ago, MIT. Is there any like now, where in 10 years, like we'll be looking back on this was the big hype, but it wasn't ready just yet?
Yeah, I think wearable sensors fit within that bucket because I think
so. They're still in there.
Yeah, like I look back at that and think, okay, it was great. It allowed us to get more detailed about, okay, well, how much distance was somebody covering, what type of speeds and what type of accelerations and decelerations and change of directions were happening. But it didn't give us enough. It still doesn't give us enough in terms of, well, how is somebody doing that? And I think that's the next evolution, and I think that's why, like, markerless optical that gives us like biomechanical information, just I think it far surpasses the type of information that we can get from wearables. Other challenges we get with wearables are that you contract them yourself as a team, so you get one side of the ball, right? You don't get to see what your opposition is doing. You also don't get to see where the ball is, and without the ball and what's happening in the game, the context of what somebody's doing is completely different, right? If you know where the ball is and you know where the opposition is, now you know why somebody is making a decision. And now you know what they're seeing, and I think wearables were probably a good first step for us in terms of really starting to gather some information, but I think they helped us also understand the limitations really quickly as well.
Yeah, and from a data, we'll just call it curation standpoint, I know you guys do a bunch of different things, but we've seen a lot of companies with the rise of this try to come in, aggregate it, provide deeper insights. Similar to Kitman, how have you guys been able to stand out, scale faster, grow to a larger operation in business than a lot of the, what we'll just call it, competitors or similar type companies out there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that have made us different. a lot of organizations in this space have gone and focused on one particular area. So they'll try and bring together all of the data in one area. I think that's really limiting in terms of use cases, right? So somebody will say, okay, well, we're going and collecting all of the medical information, or we're going and collecting all the data from coaches, or we're going and collecting all the data from the fitness staff and strength and conditioning staff. What we've tried to do is take a much wider purview of that so we can bring together every piece of information within a high performance environment. Secondly, what we've also tried to do is we've always started with why. We've always looked at, well, what are the questions that we're trying to answer? And oftentimes it's not just about the data. It's about having the context of the information as well. If we're trying to go in and understand specific types of injuries, where they're occurring, how they're occurring, just having the injury and having the date it happened on is not enough. We need to understand the mechanism of how it happened. We need to understand where it happened. We need to understand the feel. We need to understand the surface conditions. We need to understand the protective equipment that they're wearing. Like there's a huge amount of kind of surrounding contextual information that becomes really relevant. So then when you're coming back to answer those questions as to why are this happening, if you have all of that context, you can answer it. If you don't, then you can't answer that question. And I think what's made us really different is that we've always started with, well, what is the question that you're trying to answer? And that's led us then to not just consume the information that's been thrown at us, but to think about, well, what surrounding and contextual information will we need as well to put our partners in a position that they can answer those questions when the time comes. And it seems simple maybe, but it's a completely different philosophical approach to how you build your technology.
So it seems like, and I guess this goes to a deeper question, a question about a question, how are you, they always say, right, like it's not about the answers, it's about asking better questions or whatever. How are you, I guess, have you read a book, or like, how are you what's your framework for asking better questions to provide better answers around this stuff? Because it seems like that's a core philosophy for you.
Yeah, I've read too many books about these type of concepts, about learning, and about whether it's about learning, whether it's about analytics, whether it's about business process, things like even like philosophy, like things like thinking fast and thinking slow, like Daniel Kahneman's book. The thinking fast side is let's just grab the data. The thinking slow side is the sitting down and actually saying, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve? And I think we have built up a skill set and an approach internally to what we call performance discovery. And performance discovery for us is all about learning about our partners. It's all about having an intimate understanding of their environment. And I think that comes from being practitioners. We are a group of practitioners that worked in professional sport. We didn't start this company because we wanted to have a tech company. We started this company because we wanted to solve a problem that we were facing ourselves every day. Many of the people that have joined the company have joined because of those reasons as well. They faced the same issues that I faced in my career. And I think, so for us, the approach that we always take is starting with why. So like the Simon Sinek approach. And most people say, well, I want to understand what types of injuries, or I want to stop injuries from happening, or et cetera. And that's 20 levels deep. We need to understand, well, why is that important? Why does that matter? And it can be quite annoying, right? Coming in and asking all those questions, but then it gets you to a point where you really understand, why is that important for this particular organization? What is it that matters about them? What is unique about their culture? How did they want to make decisions? How do they want to communicate? What types of data are they collecting? How do they want to play their game? How do they want to deploy their resources? And decision making is not always equal across teams. Like the players and assets that these teams have are not all the same, and they can't all be treated exactly the same either, right? And that means that if we don't have that understanding, if we don't have that intimate knowledge of like the problems that they're trying to solve, how they want to communicate, how they want to think about different elements of how they build their business. If we don't understand that, we can't help, right? We can't be a real partner. We're just giving them an off-the-shelf solution. We're not giving them something that's really, really like answering the questions that are important to them.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned a few books. I'm just curious, any that you reread every year or top of mind for you that you think other people should check out?
That's a very good question. I think it's different all of the time. I've been having some conversations about female sport recently, so I'm reading Good for a Girl right now, which I've like really, really enjoyed. It's not particularly business focused, but it's really interesting in terms of the development of female sport and how different it's been to male sport. The resourcing that they actually get, the approaches that have been taken. And I think for anybody that's interested in the female game and the development of the female game and how it needs to continue to evolve, I think it's a pretty fascinating book. But yeah, I love, that recently read Thinking in Bets. And even though you asked me at the start, I'm in Vegas, Thinking in Bets is a really interesting one, even for somebody that is not interested in gambling. It's pretty fascinating just to think about how professional gamblers do think about decision making and how we can apply similar type of logic and rationale to how we make decisions and where we want to place our bets or place our resources and why we would do that. I don't know. I'm a big book reader, so my list is my list is really long. We could have an entire podcast just talking about types of books and why they're important.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it seems like obviously you've taken self-learning there, and books are great. I must say I read a lot too, so it's cool because you get a lot of different talking points, but. You mentioned a little bit earlier the vision standpoint of getting other people along the vision for you. You weren't trying to build a tech company. You're trying to solve this problem, right? You've raised a good amount of money. A lot of founders, especially right now, are struggling in the sports scene. There's not a ton of pre-seed and seed investors unless you're at the growth. What strategies, what did you do to be able to get investors behind your vision as well and be able to scale this thing up a little bit faster? And how was that process? And I'm sure you learned a bunch over the years too.
Yeah, I certainly have learned a bunch. I think my opinion is there's no secret formula for it, right? And I think what works for one business may not work for another, right? And one thing that I have unwavering belief in the approach that we're taking and what we're trying to do. And I think that kind of passion for what you're doing, that passion, that belief, and that commitment to the mission or cause, I think people feel that, right? They feel those vibrations, and I think people invest in people, right? They don't just invest in businesses. There's a million great business ideas. They invest in people. And I think it's really important for that reason to be incredibly authentic, to be incredibly passionate. One question for me will be if I wasn't getting paid to do this, would I be continuing to do it? And the answer to that is I just love what I do. I get such a kick out of getting to pursue this vision and mission every day. This is everything that I care about. And I think when you have that mindset and you have that belief, I think people know that and feel that and see that. And I think that's what investors want, right? They want somebody that has unwavering belief in the journey that they're on and love what they do, because everything is hard, right? Business is incredibly hard. Startup businesses are a whole different kettle of fish, and everybody knows you're going to face incredible challenges. And when those incredible challenges come, are you going to run away, or are you going to just get pushed through this because it's that important to you? So I would suggest for anybody that's heading down a path like this or thinking about heading down a path like this, you would want to ask yourself those questions first, right? Because
right.
I think you don't want to get into this if that's not what it is for you either, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's similar to landing partners, clients as well. From a business model perspective, are you heavily? It seems like, at least from your website, heavily B2B focused, and then just curious on how you went about that process and scaled up that side of, one school to 3 schools, 5, one team, federations, the differences from that lens.
Yeah, so we are heavily B2B focused. We don't do anything B2C. And that's always been the business model, was supporting teams and leagues. And, in the beginning, a lot of it was kind of word of mouth, right? We didn't know how to do this. So I didn't know who the right people were. There was a lot of Googling, trying to find who are the relevant people and relevant job titles in specific teams, and going and, being, I think just being in front of people, talking to people, cultivating conversations, reaching out again, right? Trying to get those conversations kicked off and trying to get people to know who we are. And it's, it takes a long time. This is a relatively well-defined industry. So, to get in front of people is important, to show them who you are, to tell them what you're trying to achieve, and then to build and cultivate those relationships over time. most businesses are very relationship focused. So that's what we've always tried to do. We've had a consistent mission and vision that we've been working on. We've been executing against that, sometimes well, sometimes really well, sometimes not so well. And I think just having that consistency of people seeing us come through that evolution and continue to build and build and build and build and follow through on what we said we were going to do, I think that's what's important, and that's what's really helped us to get to the point that we're at today.
And have you seen, I know you guys dipped into the defense industry a little bit as well outside of sports. Have you seen, as you looked at, we'll call it like sports as a wedge, how have you thought about hitting number one, international markets, with the number two areas, ancillary areas to sports?
Yeah, well, I suppose the international one is easy because I started the company in Ireland, and so we saturated the Irish market within like 12 months, and we always thought internationally. So we've always been trying to scale internationally. We have staff in, I don't know, probably at least 10 countries at this point. So we've always been thinking internationally. We've always been pushing out internationally, and sometimes, like, especially given that we started a lot in soccer or football in the UK, a lot of the staff move through European countries to other big name teams, and that's always really helped because as they move to a different team in a different country, they would have brought us along with them. And that's helped us to kind of grow and internationalize as well, which is slightly different than over here in the US, right? When the NFL only is in one country, for example, so you're not having people move to other countries to play that game. But then from a perspective of how do we think about, what's the question? How do we think about growing across sports, or
call it like sports as a wedge, so like ancillary or adjacent, so like defense?
The defense, yeah. So defense was an area that we always believed had like real viability. We were always very solely focused on sports, and we actually got an inbound from the DoD. They had heard about us, and they had a specific problem that they were trying to solve in terms of performance optimization and talent development within the defense industry. And we went and just started to look at it and talk with them and learn. And from getting in and learning about it, we learned very quickly that the defense industry is very similar to sport, right? What we call scouting and recruitment in sport, they call assessment and selection. They're trying to find the right people for the right roles, right? Not everybody does the same thing, just like a striker doesn't do the same thing as a goalkeeper. And once they get them in, we have like these youth development models we call academies, and we, generally that's called coaching and talent development. They have these training pipelines, and the training pipelines are designed to do the same thing, to build the capabilities and capacity that they need in these people. And then once they get them through that and they're qualified, similarly to like within the elite sport world, somebody becomes a professional. At that point, it's all about performance optimization and health optimization. They care about the same thing, improving the longevity of these people, managing their health, managing their performance capacity and capabilities. And when we started to see that the synergies were there, we believed that our tech had a really important role to play and could play a very important role in terms of managing the same aspects. And that's largely been proven to be true. And it's the defense side is a really important and very big part of our business at this point. We have multiple different contracts across different areas across the Department of Defense. And it's something that we're really passionate about too. When you look at the same way 10 years ago, the sports industry was quite traditional in terms of the lack of data or a lack of ability to manage like health, safety, wellness, performance, like performance development, even physical development. Defense is in a very similar place. They have decent amounts of data, but it all lives in like these kind of fragmented silos across their organization. They don't have a way of bringing that together. They don't have a way of empowering trainees to understand how to look after themselves. And generally, these people are people that care about their health. They care about their physical performance. They care about their capacity and capabilities. So it's been really enjoyable, like, learning experience to see how that has developed, but also to see the role that we can play and how that's becoming a more and more important role day by day.
So what's next for Kitman Labs as you look over the next, you love what you do, so I'm assuming you plan on doing it for at least another 5 years. Where are you looking, or where's your horizon of what's next? Because you've obviously done a lot over the previous, from now, sports, defense. I'm sure, I don't know your number, but hundreds of teams and federations and leagues. No,
Yeah,
what's on the pipeline?
we have thousands of teams at this point, which is great. What's next is the same, right? What's next is our vision is not changing, our mission is not changing. It's just continuing to drive that home, right? We want to become ubiquitous across like the world of high performance. We want to continue to help organizations to take the data landscape that they have and turn it into real intelligence. And we want, what we care about is helping high performance organizations unlock the limits of accomplishment. And I think that's a really lofty vision and mission, which it should be for anything that's worth doing.
Mm.
And it's just about helping our partners to get there.
Yep. Where can people learn more? Website, socials, anything where you guys are?
KitmanLabs.com. KitmanLabs.com and Kitman Labs on Twitter, or X as they call it these days. Yeah, they can reach out to us. We're always here waiting to talk to people about what we do.
Love it. Love it. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and have fun out in the desert for a few more days. Where are you based typically?
I live in Northern California in wine country in Sonoma County.
Okay.